So $1.5 trillion company is doing arithmetic in public, right? You've got like 2 million new Mexicans on one side of the ledger, and then, the massive cost of rebuilding their platform's architecture on the other. Meta's lawyers, they totally told reporters this week that if this injunction comes down on Monday, they might just have no choice but to pull Facebook and Instagram out of the state entirely. That's not a threat, is it? That's a calculation, just kind of performed out loud.
Exactly. It's a calculation, Marcus, and it tells you what's actually been priced. I mean, if you look at the Kalshi contract on a clean Meta New Mexico settlement by like July 1st, it's sitting at 35 cents. 35 cents, which means, 65 cents on the other side of that dollar says this doesn't end with a check. People are really betting that this is a much bigger deal than just a settlement. It's fascinating, right? It's all out there in the market.
Wow. The gap between what the headlines are calling this and what capital is actually pricing, that's what we're making legible today. Because get this, the same gap is open in 2 other places at the same time. The Federal Open Market Committee just last week voted 8-3-1. That's like the most divided Fed vote since October 1992. And the Pentagon, they've quietly told 4 NATO allies that contracted weapons deliveries, they're slipping. 3 theaters, 3 totally different versions of the same exact move.
And Marcus, that's it. The move is what we're after. By the end of this conversation, you'll actually be able to spot it in any sector you care about. Any industry. It's that moment when an institution that has run primarily on persuasion finally announces that persuasion has failed and it reaches for compulsion instead. And once you can spot it, I'm going to give you the next question to ask, the one that really determines whether this new architecture is like a constraint at all or just the next surface to optimize against. It's a huge shift.
So let's anchor what's actually on the docket for Meta then, right? The jury phase, that's over. In March, this Santa Fe jury found Meta liable for 75,000 violations of New Mexico's Unfair Practices Act. And they ordered the statutory maximum, $375 million in civil penalties. New Mexico became the first state to win at trial against a major social platform on child endangerment grounds. Monday is phase 2, bench trial, no jury. And the state isn't asking for more money, They're asking the judge to order specific structural changes to how Meta operates for every minor in New Mexico.
And this is exactly where the framing breaks, Marcus. Most of the coverage is calling Monday a regulatory event, just one more turn of the regulation wheel, right? It isn't. What's happening Monday is law-changing categories. For 15 years, every major decision a platform made about minors was a tunable parameter. You set the policy, you accept the fine, you optimize for the next quarter. The fine was just a cost of doing business. Monday is the moment that, absolutely ends. It's a huge categorical change.
Say more about, categories. That's really interesting.
Okay, so there's a really useful distinction between a tunable parameter and a hard constraint. A tunable parameter is something you just adjust inside an optimization function. Dial it up, dial it down, weigh it against revenue. A hard constraint is something the optimization just cannot cross at all. Same activity, but the math is fundamentally different. The whole engagement maximization framing assumed the rules were tunables. Court-ordered architecture is the moment a tunable just becomes a hard constraint. To give the listener a frame, Marcus, think about the difference between a doctor recommending a diet and a surgeon installing a bypass. Both are interventions. The diet is persuasion. The metabolism is being asked to adjust. The bypass is plumbing. The blood goes the way the plumbing goes, regardless of what you eat. Once the bypass is installed, you cannot uninstall it by changing the diet. The diet era and the surgery era are different categories of intervention. We are watching in real time 3 institutions move from the diet to the surgery.
And it's not just New Mexico, right? The Fed held rates last week, 8-3-1 vote. 3 regional Fed presidents wanted easing bias language deleted entirely. Governor Mirren wanted an immediate quarter-point cut. That's not a normal disagreement about rates. That's the committee fracturing on whether forward guidance, the soft instrument the Fed's used for 20 years, still has any capacity to move markets at all. And then the Pentagon, private cables to the UK, Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, saying contracted foreign military sales are delayed. Estonian defense minister already went public. Same flip. Diplomatic assurance is the soft instrument. Production capacity is the hard constraint. Promise can be kept until the warehouse is empty. So, what's the baseline here?
The baseline names the flip, Marcus. What it doesn't tell you is that the architecture being built in one theater migrates to other theaters, whether anyone votes on it or not. Look at what's actually in New Mexico's proposed injunction. Mandatory age verification at the network level, Guardian account linkage, end-to-end encryption suspended for users under 18, a complete operating specification, and it's a template. 40+ state attorneys general have suits pending. Each of them is now studying this filing. The European Commission has found Meta's existing safeguards don't adequately prevent minors under 13 from accessing services. Their fine schedule reaches up to 6% of global turnover. That's $12 billion in potential exposure on Meta's 2025 revenue. But the more important fact is what the Commission is building beside the fine.
The age verification app? That's huge.
Exactly, the EU-wide age verification app. Originally like a longer horizon project, now accelerated to end of 2026 deployment, specifically because of this enforcement track. And here's the lateral connection I really want you to see. An age verification app isn't just an age verification app. It is a continent-scale cryptographic identity infrastructure. Once it exists, once every major platform integrates it, once consumers are trained to use it, the architecture is just done. Whether it's only used for age, or used for finance, or used for political participation, or used for civic identity, that's a software question, not a hardware question. The hard work was building the trust layer. The hard work is now nearly finished. 5 years out, every consumer-facing digital interaction in Europe routes through identity verification. 10 years out, it's the assumed substrate. Not because anyone passed a single law making it so, because the building blocks were assembled for one purpose, and then they were available for any purpose. This is the second-order effect that platform redesign analysis usually misses. Forced redesign in one theater builds infrastructure that propagates into other theaters silently.
So, in each theater, the public story is a single decision, right? But the actual story is a substrate being assembled.
Yes, and the substrate doesn't unwind on the timeline of the conditions that produced it. But Marcus, we have to put pressure on what we just said, because the analysis we just built has an assumption inside it. We just spent 2 chapters describing forced redesign as if it's structurally superior to soft regulation, as if the move from a tunable parameter to a hard constraint is on net an improvement in how systems are governed. That is the load-bearing assumption, and it just doesn't survive scrutiny. A boundary set by humans is just the next variable for the next set of humans. The boundary you've just installed is durable in one direction and adjustable in another.
Let me just build the strongest version of that redesign case so you have something really solid to push on. The strongest version is that infrastructure outlasts the humans who built it, right? The bypass analogy holds. The bypass is installed, the blood routes through the bypass, and even if the surgeon retires, the bypass keeps doing what bypasses do. Court-ordered code changes get integrated into Metastack. The age verification system gets deployed across European consumer software. Once the architecture is up, replacement personnel inherit it. The architecture has its own momentum. That's the Phoenix governance frame, and the data supports it. These changes don't unwind on the timeline of the conditions that produce them.
I accept the durability claim. The architecture is durable. What I don't accept is that durability equals alignment. The bypass keeps moving blood through the bypass, but who decided where the bypass goes? The arbiter of the architecture is human. The arbiter can be captured. And here's the part of the dynamic that gets worse, not better, when soft instruments fail. The existence of a hard boundary creates the appearance of constraint. The appearance of constraint reduces external scrutiny, and that reduction in scrutiny makes the arbiter cheaper to capture. Forced redesign concentrates government's authority into a smaller, more visible, more pressurable role. The boundary is more durable than soft regulation, and it's a much, much more attractive target. You see? That's the real challenge.
That's a real concern, but it cuts both ways, right? The same concentration that makes the arbiter capturable also makes the arbiter visible. You can't lobby an algorithm in private. You can lobby a regulator in private, but you can also see who they took meetings with, you know? The concentration is a vulnerability and a forcing function for transparency simultaneously, I think.
I'd accept that if the forcing function were active. But take the concrete signal. Each item in the proposed injunction will need a specifier going forward, someone who decides next year whether 90 hours is still right, whether the light count default still holds. The role didn't exist 3 years ago. It will be filled by someone whose name we don't yet know, and it will be filled differently by every state that adopts the New Mexico template. 40-plus state attorneys general have pending suits, so 40 different state child safety monitors will, in the absence of federal coordination, each be optimizing their own piece of the same code base. The boundary doesn't go away. The boundary multiplies.
And the question totally moves then.
It does. The old question was, should this be regulated? That debate is closing. The new question is, who selects the regulator, who replaces the regulator, what happens when 40 regulators disagree, and who arbitrates between them. Those questions don't have soft instruments left to settle them. We've established that the soft instruments have just utterly failed. The question of how the new architecture stays aligned with the public interest is the question we entered this transition without an answer to.
So the architecture is real, the durability is real, but the alignment is the open question.
Exactly. And it's not the question forced redesign was designed to answer.
So we promised at the start that you'd be able to spot this soft-to-hard flip in any sector you care about, and that you know the question to ask once you've spotted it. Both halves. The flip is that moment an institution that has run on persuasion announces persuasion has failed, and it reaches for compulsion. The Phoenix governance frame names 3 theaters where this happened in the same week: courts on platforms, the Fed on rate guidance, the Pentagon on weapons logistics. You can spot it by watching for 2 signals together. First, a sharp public statement from inside the institution that the existing toolkit is no longer adequate. Powell's 4 supply shocks in a row, the New Mexico AG's wave of litigation, the Pentagon's private cables. Second, a market price that just totally disagrees with the institution's own surface narrative. The Kalshi contracts gave us 3 of those today. Settlement in New Mexico at 35 cents, Q3 Fed hike at 28, defense export decline at 72. When the institution and the market are pricing the durability of the soft instrument differently, the flip is already happening.
And the question that comes next, Marcus, is the one we just spent the 3rd chapter opening up. Once you've spotted the flip, ask, who selects the new arbiter? What is their replacement mechanism? And what happens when arbiters in different jurisdictions disagree? Forced redesign answers the question of whether the constraint will hold. It does not answer the question of whether the constraint will stay aligned with the interest that produced it. The architecture is more durable than soft regulation. That cuts both ways, right? Harder to remove, harder to keep honest. The existence of a hard boundary reduces external scrutiny precisely because the boundary feels settled. And settled is the condition under which capture is cheapest. So, track the flip, then immediately ask who runs the new code. The old debate was, should we regulate this? That debate is closing across multiple theaters at once. The new debate is, who regulates the regulators? There is no soft instrument left to settle that one. The institutions that ran on persuasion have just announced that persuasion does not scale. The question of who controls the architecture they're now building is being answered in the same conditions that retired the soft tools. The architecture is going up. Who runs it is open. That's where the next several years happen.
Marilyn, that was an incredibly incisive look into these tectonic shifts. To our viewers, thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive. If you found this discussion valuable, please consider giving us a like, leaving a comment with your thoughts, subscribing to the channel, or even better, sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It genuinely helps us grow our network and bring more conversations like this to you.
Absolutely, Marcus. Engaging with these ideas is how we collectively navigate a rapidly changing landscape. Your participation helps surface the questions that truly matter.
Indeed, because as we've explored today, the debate isn't just about whether to regulate, but who will regulate the regulators in this new era of hard constraints. That's a critical question for all of us to consider.
And that's precisely why an informed public is so crucial. The architecture is going up, and understanding its implications is the first step toward thoughtful engagement.
Perfectly put, Marilyn. Thank you once again for sharing your expertise. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.